Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Kevin McGovern, and today's talk is about the effects of puberty on the adolescent baseball pitcher. So, we all know that puberty comes in all shapes, sizes, and times, but its effect on the human body is dramatic and can cause dramatic issues with the baseball pitcher. So, before we begin, let me just give you a little bit of data on me. I am a physical therapist for the past 30 years. Private practice owner. I own a private practice in Acton, Massachusetts. I have been working with baseball pitchers for the last 20 or 25 years or so. So my story is kind of unique. I played a lot of baseball in high school, but decided that golf was my real passion at the time, and didn't really play my junior senior year, and concentrated on golf. But ended up going to Northeastern University and taking some time off of playing baseball, and then I tried out Northeastern, and things didn't go very well. So after I get out of school, I took up baseball in men's leagues, and by that time I was a licensed physical therapist, and I was practicing, and I made this throw one day from first base to third base, and I felt this crunch in my elbow, and lo and behold, I tore my ulnar collateral ligament. You can kind of still see here my right elbow doesn't really get straight. So obviously, it would be very difficult as a young clinician with mounting student debt to take off 4 or 5 months or be able to operate with only one arm. So I kind of rehabbed it on my own. And then I still wanted to kind of play baseball. So I really got into learning, how to throw correctly. And I really found the secret of that is really to use our friend Sir Isaac Newton and gravity to do that. And what I mean by gravity is really throwing, you've probably heard this expression, you have to throw downhill. Well, I challenge people to actually, when they say that, to actually really know what that means. And for me, that meant throwing with gravity, that I wasn't using my arm until the last in what we call the kinetic chain. And we see other sports, overhand throwing sports, do the exact same thing. Tennis, right? We don't see tennis players on the operating table for elbow surgeries, and we don't see cricket players on the operating table with elbow surgeries because they're all throwing with gravity downhill. So, fixed my arm, went back to pitching, went back to playing. I certainly had arm soreness or elbow soreness after throwing, but I ended up pitching until I was 44 years old in various men's leagues. So I think I did okay. Back in 2006, I got the trainer therapist job for a now defunct team called the National Pride. They were a independent baseball team in Nashua, New Hampshire. Butch Hobson, the former Red Sox manager, was the manager, and they had many guys there that were former major leaguers and or high draft picks. We actually had 2 pitchers that saw major league time, and I believe 2 or 3 on the staff that were drafted in the first couple rounds. So if you know anything about independent baseball, most of these players are reclamation projects, and a lot has to do with injury. So I was fascinated to see all these pitchers that were injured, they told me that they had their training manuals from the various teams. So I'm like, oh, can you bring this in? I really want to see this. So Kansas City Royals, Yankees, Indians, Braves, there was a bunch. They all brought in, and, in my spare time I was looking through them, and much to my shock, I realized, like, oh my goodness, I would do like none of these things or just the opposite of these things. No wonder these guys didn't return to pitching because these exercises aren't even following proper kinesiology. So, boop, light bulb went off. Let's form this program. Let's call it Velocity RX, and let's try to save 1,000,000 arms. So, that is my goal. I'm out here trying to save 1,000,000 arms. And after a few years of knocking my head against the wall in the college, pro, and upper high school ranks, I've decided that most of those players already have fixed ideas of what should be done. They've already have been working with someone or whatever, and you're not going to necessarily change what they're doing until they have a catastrophic injury, and I certainly don't want to be a harbinger of death and waiting around for that to help people. So within the last couple of years, I've really started to focus on the real adolescent athlete, okay? And the number 13 comes to mind, and 13 is the age where most baseball players quit. Now, some quit because they want to play lacrosse, but a lot of quit baseball because they were the big fish in the little pond in Little League, and then the diamond got bigger, and they got bigger, and they got worse, right? They became unathletic. You know, they went from 5'2" to, like, I think when I was 12, I think after I hit puberty, I think when I was 12 years old in Little League, I was 5'9". I'm 6'3" now, so I think I remember being 5'9". But there's a huge difference between 5'2" and 5'9". Okay, it's not just the 7 inches, right? Spine gets longer, extremities get longer, and they get uneven. So I had a young kid, 2 brothers in my office the other day, and one of them had gone through a growth spurt, and you could really tell immediately. You know, you see the forward flex posture, and you see the legs that are just mismatched. So if you ever want to know if you're still going to grow, the biggest thing to look at is the legs. So we know that the femur is the longest bone in the body. That's been proven. So when you sit down and your tibia, the lower leg there, is equal or longer than your femur, you know that you've got more inches to grow. But that puts a whole nother spin on stability, balance, and power. So we have all of these changes, and what happens, they go from the small diamond to the big diamond, get into middle school, start strength and conditioning. Okay, well, we can't build an athlete on a bad base of support. We would never start building a house in the swamplands of Florida, right? The Everglades. It just wouldn't work, right? We need a stable foundation. And what I found is that stable foundation is severely lacking in many, many post-puberty growth spurt, 12 to 14, 15-year-old players that wasn't addressed, corrected, and then on top of that, we build athletic movements, okay? So what is happening is now these kids are, doing the strength and conditioning at their travel ball program, or maybe they're middle school, or maybe they're high school, or they're on this guy looking at TikTok, Instagram, and they're seeing a lot of exercises. Now, some of those exercises are okay. Some of those exercises, or maybe a lot of those exercises, are injurious, and most are injurious to a 13-year-old kid just off a growth spurt or puberty cycle, because he doesn't have control of his spinal column. He doesn't have control of his kinetic chains. He doesn't have control of his glutes, his pelvic floor, scapular depressors, all the muscles that would help him be a pitcher, or really to be able to move neurologically correct. He doesn't have control over, or they're out of sequence, one's on, should be off, and he becomes an uncoordinated mini disaster. So that was now my focus of really starting to redevelop the Velocity RX program for that particular person. And the only way to do that is to evaluate the human movement first. So back in my practice 25 years ago, out of basic desperation to find something that worked to battle insurance companies, I needed to find a functional exam that would help me help patients continue care, because insurance companies' main goal is not to pay and to cut them off. So, around 2000, 2001, I didn't really see a functional movement exam out there that would incorporate a 70-year-old grandmother and a 20-year-old athlete, because in an outpatient practice, you've got a huge range of people. So desperation turned into inspiration, and I invented, after many trial and error, a movement exam that I call GAME, which stands for Graded Active Movement Exam. And that is, lunge, squat, single leg deadlift, and two very unique shoulder tests to me. And I score them mostly on a pass-fail basis, but I've been using that test in my practice across the board because it measures one thing that everyone has in common, and that is the initial sequence of human movement. I have it, you have it, LeBron James, everyone has an initial sequence of movement, and there's only one correct answer to that movement. There's no deviation. Deviation is going to cause dysfunction. So it basically measures those deviated movements. So movements that a young pitcher or any pitcher has to master is, if we talk about the lower body, is the squat, right? Pelvic back first, everything folds symmetrically. And when you have a 13-year-old kid do a squat, you are going to see many, 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 many variations of that movement, and none of them are going to be any good. So when we look at balance, power, okay, even protecting our hips, our backs, the squat is a vital movement that is most oftentimes a disaster. Knees are going forward over toes, feet are going all over the place, pelvis can't stay stable. And then we add weight. Oh, let's deadlift this. Let's squat this. Let's do our pitching motion. All of those movements on top that are okay if we have a stable moving body now are contributing to this movement disaster and literally contributing to injury. Now we go upstairs to the shoulder blades. Our kids are like this all day, right? In this position, right? Shrugging. Our upper trap is the root of all evil for our upper extremities, okay? It is a muscle that is the sole cause of neck, shoulder, carpal tunnel, because we want to do this all day. That is opposite of how the body is supposed to move. When you lift your arms up, your shoulder blades should depress. Take the ball out of our glove, our shoulder blades should depress. Now you'll hear fancy terminology called scap load. Okay, there's no such thing as scap load. Okay, it's a kinesiological term called your scapular humeral rhythm. For every 3 degrees I lift my arm, my shoulder blade needs to turn and depress 2 degrees. Sometimes, depending on what you read, it might be a 1-to-1 ratio, or but either way, my shoulder blade needs to drop down and disengage from the upper trap. However, in our adolescent athlete, most of them only have upper trap. You look at the back of any 13-year-old kid, you're going to see, essentially engorged upper traps, and between the shoulder blades, you're going to see a gap where really no muscles exist, and when they move, those shoulder blades are all over the place. So again, we talk about human movement. There's only one right answer. So when we look at someone moving and their shoulder blades are all over the place, now we're having them go and throw, 70 pitches for their town team on Wednesday, and on the weekend, throw another 70 pitches in their AAU or travel ball program. That's 140 pitches on some really, really bad mechanics. And all of this, okay, is contributing to an injury rate of the elbow and shoulder like I've never seen before. Tons and tons of Tommy John, growth plate tears, shoulder labrum, that I think is extremely preventable, okay, because it's preventable by teaching the child to move better, right? Now, in my day, we never had any of this, but also in my day, we weren't glued in front of this or the TV set. We were outside moving around. We were learning how to move by trial and error, by doing things. But kids today aren't doing that. They're only really moving, this includes my kids, they're really only moving when there's an organized activity. And the person or organization running that organized activity, if they're not honing in on the changes of the body in this age group, your child is going to get hurt. It's just a matter of when. Or they're going to be disgusted with their performance, get frustrated, and play lacrosse, or play basketball, or play a sport that doesn't require the real honing of skills like baseball or pitching does. And that is why 70% of the people playing baseball stop when they're 13. Okay? And the way around that is, if you're picking a program for your child, travel ball program, or working with a trainer, they have to start with the basics, right? Think of a Lego model, okay? We don't take it out of the box and start on page 9, okay? We start on page 1. Now it's boring. One block at a time, one movement at a time. And that's how the human body needs to be trained. One movement block at a time. We build, oh look, I even have Legos, right? We build, we build, we build, we build, we build. We don't start in the penthouse. Penthouse is very nice. Great. It's nice up there. We got big screen TVs. We got automatic curtains. You press a button. There's light shows. But if we don't take care of the foundation or the parking garage, that building is coming down. That child is going to get injured or lose performance. Neither two options do we want. So when choosing a program and you hear strength and conditioning, you really need to go in and dive in and figure out exactly what is being taught. If your child is handed a Excel spreadsheet and told to do a bunch of exercises, turn around and run out of that facility as fast as you can. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Get out, okay? When you were talking about strength and conditioning, the 11 to 15-year-old kid, you need someone supervising every move they make. You need someone on top of them making sure that they're doing all of the movements correct. And get rid of the weights, okay? I'm a very big proponent of weightlifting and Olympic lifting, believe me. However, it is so infrequent that I find an adolescent, even a high school, even a college kid, that could properly do a squat that I would say, okay, go in the squat rack, do what you do, squat 250 pounds. If they just don't have the basic movement, then they put that weight on top of them, and boom, their back hurts. There's compression fractures. So, take my advice. this is a very, very sensitive age where we could do a lot of harm, but more importantly, we can do a lot of good by reinforcing, teaching good, sound movement. Now, that also doesn't happen with 1 or 2 times a week, 10 reps. No way. The body is not going to react in a positive way. I start with 1 or 2 exercises, 100 reps every day. You're doing scapular depression, you're holding that movement 5 seconds, 50 times, 2 sets. We're talking about teaching the squat. I start with literally glute sets. On your belly, squeezing your bums as hard as you can, 5-second holds, doing 100 a day. That's how we teach the body muscle memory to be able to perform these movements. So, again, you hear strength and conditioning. Make sure the coach is a movement first coach. How to better my child's movement. If not, run. Now, if you need help, please comment. Click the link in my bio. My Velocity RX program is now online, and I can even perform my game evaluative tests online. I'm giving you the test. You're sending video of your child back. I'm analyzing their movement, customizing a program to correct the basics of their human movement first before we teach pitching specific and then mechanic specific movements. That's how it has to be done. We have to train kids at this age from a movement first perspective. So, I think I've been about 23 minutes. I don't want to take any more of your time, but thank you for listening. I'll be back on frequently. If you have any questions about this presentation, please drop them in the chat. Next time I come online, I will address them, or I will address them right there in the post. Thanks for listening, everybody.